The biting wind, carrying the scent of damp earth and a metallic tang that hinted at old blood, clawed at Arthur's exposed skin. He clutched the tattered remains of his map, the ink blurred by a relentless drizzle that seemed to weep from the oppressive gray sky. How long had he been on this path? Days bled into nights, marked only by the shifting patterns of shadow and the growing dread that coiled in his gut. He'd been a fool to trust the local legend, a whispered tale of a shortcut through the Blackwood Forest. They said it shaved hours off the journey to Oakhaven. They hadn't mentioned the path that felt like a breath held too long, the air thick with an unseen weight, the silence punctuated by unsettling whispers that danced just beyond the edge of hearing. His first encounter had been subtle, a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A tall, gaunt figure standing motionless amongst the gnarled trees, its face obscured by shadow. When he'd turned for a better look, it was gone, leaving only the unsettling feeling of being watched. He chalked it up to exhaustion, the tricks a weary mind could play. But then came the sounds. Soft at first, like the rustling of dry leaves, they escalated into mournful sighs that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath his feet. Sometimes, he'd hear a faint, childlike weeping, quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence. The path itself was a torment. It twisted and turned without reason, leading him deeper into the heart of the forest, away from any semblance of civilization. The trees were ancient and grotesque, their branches contorted into shapes that resembled grasping claws and leering faces. The ground underfoot shifted between loose, crumbling earth and slick, moss-covered stones, making each step a precarious endeavor. One evening, as the perpetual twilight deepened, he saw her. Standing by a twisted oak, bathed in an unnatural, pale luminescence, was a woman. Her form was translucent, like smoke caught in the moonlight, her long, dark hair cascading around a face etched with an unbearable sorrow. She wore a tattered white gown, and her eyes, though seemingly without pupils, held an intensity that pierced Arthur to his core. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped him. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The spectral woman simply stood there, her gaze fixed on something beyond his vision, a silent testament to some long-forgotten tragedy. A wave of profound sadness washed over Arthur, so potent it felt like a physical blow. Then, as silently as she had appeared, she vanished, leaving behind only the chilling echo of her sorrow. Arthur stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He wanted to run, to escape this terrifying reality, but his legs felt rooted to the spot. He was trapped in a nightmare made manifest. As he continued his agonizing trek, the encounters grew more frequent and more disturbing. He saw fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures darting between the trees, their forms indistinct but their presence radiating a palpable malevolence. He heard guttural growls that seemed to rise from the depths of the earth, and once, a high-pitched manic laughter that sent shivers down his spine. Strange objects materialized on the path. A rusted child's toy, a tarnished silver locket engraved with a single elegant E, a length of frayed rope tied into a hangman's knot. Each object seemed to pulse with a residual energy, a whisper of pain and despair. He came across a dilapidated stone well, its opening choked with weeds and shadow. As he peered down into its dark abyss, he heard a faint splashing sound, followed by a choked sob that seemed to claw its way up from the depths. He recoiled in horror, convinced some tormented soul was trapped within. One particularly unsettling encounter involved a group of spectral children playing a silent game amongst the trees. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, their laughter a soundless contortion of their faces. Their eyes, wide and vacant, seemed to stare right through him, filling him with an icy dread. He began to notice a pattern in the apparitions, fragmented glimpses of a recurring tragedy. He saw the ghostly outline of a horse-drawn carriage, overturned and broken amidst the trees. He saw a shadowy figure, a man hunched over in despair, seemingly searching for something lost. He saw the translucent woman by the oak, always alone, always weeping. A chilling realization began to dawn on Arthur. These weren't random hauntings. They were echoes of a specific event, a tragedy that had stained this path with sorrow. He felt an unsettling pull, a sense that he was meant to understand their suffering. He found a small, weather-beaten wooden signpost half buried in the undergrowth. The inscription was barely legible, but he could make out a few faded words. Ashton Estate. No trespassing. Tragedy. Ashton. The name resonated with the ghostly encounters. The woman in white, the man in despair, perhaps even the spectral children. Were they all connected to this Ashton Estate? Driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand the horrors he was witnessing, Arthur pressed on. The path eventually led him to a clearing. and in the center stood the skeletal remains of a grand manor house. Its roof had long since collapsed. Its windows were empty sockets staring out at the desolate landscape, and ivy crawled up its decaying walls like grasping skeletal fingers. This must be Ashton Estate. A palpable sense of sorrow hung heavy in the air around the ruins. As Arthur cautiously approached, the spectral woman in white materialized on the crumbling steps, her sorrowful gaze fixed on the decaying facade. The shadowy figure of the man appeared in what must have been the grand hall, pacing restlessly, his head bowed in anguish. Arthur felt a wave of empathy wash over him, replacing the initial terror. These weren't malevolent spirits. They were trapped, bound to this place by their unresolved pain. He felt a strange urge to help them, to somehow ease their eternal suffering. He stepped closer to the ruins, his voice trembling as he spoke into the heavy silence. What happened here? As the words left his lips, the air around him shimmered. Fragmented images flashed before his eyes. A grand ball, laughter and music, a heated argument, a struggle, a fire raging through the manor, screams of terror, and then silence. The spectral woman on the steps seemed to react, her translucent form flickering. The shadowy man in the hall stopped pacing, his head slowly turning towards Arthur. Suddenly, a new presence manifested. A tall, imposing figure wreathed in shadow, its face completely obscured. A wave of intense malice emanated from it, a suffocating aura of anger and resentment. The other spirits seemed to cower before it. A chilling whisper slithered into Arthur's mind, cold and venomous. He took them from me, all of them. Arthur felt a jolt of understanding. This shadowy figure was the source of the lingering pain, the reason these souls were trapped. He had caused the tragedy. He looked at the spectral woman, her sorrow now tinged with fear as she gazed at the shadowy figure. He looked at the man in the hall, his despair now mixed with a helpless rage. A memory flashed in Arthur's mind. The tarnished silver locket with the E, Eleanor? Was the woman in white named Eleanor? And the man, perhaps Thomas, mentioned on the faded signpost? The shadowy figure took a step towards Arthur, its unseen presence pressing down on him, stealing his breath. He felt a surge of protectiveness towards the trapped souls. They were victims, and this malevolent entity was their tormentor. "What did you do?" Arthur demanded, his voice surprisingly steady despite the terror that still gnawed at him. The chilling whisper returned, laced with a bitter hatred. "They deserved it. They took what was mine." As the shadowy figure reached out a spectral hand, Arthur instinctively recoiled. His hand brushed against something in his pocket, his worn leather hat, a gift from his grandfather. He pulled it out, the familiar feel a small comfort in this terrifying place. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy. The shadowy figure recoiled as Arthur held the hat aloft. The other spirits seemed to gain strength, their translucent forms glowing faintly. The whisper turned into a shriek of rage. That belonged to him. Arthur didn't understand. The hat was just an old hat. But then, a memory surfaced, hazy and indistinct. A story his grandfather had once told him. A tale of a bitter rivalry, a stolen inheritance, a fire, and a distinctive leather hat. Could it be? Was his grandfather somehow connected to this tragedy? As the realization dawned, the shadowy figure lunged. Arthur instinctively threw the hat, and as it sailed through the air, something extraordinary happened. The hat began to glow, radiating a warm, golden light. As it struck the shadowy figure, the darkness around it shrieked and writhed, as if burned by holy fire. The other spirits, Eleanor, Thomas, the children, began to glow brighter, their sorrowful expressions replaced by looks of peace and understanding. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, the heavy silence replaced by a gentle breeze that rustled through the decaying manor. The shadowy figure recoiled further, its form flickering violently. The whispers of hatred turned into cries of anguish. Then Arthur noticed something else. The hat, the old leather hat he had thrown, was melting, not in a physical sense, but its form was dissolving into pure light, the golden glow intensifying. As the last vestiges of the hat dissolved, the shadowy figure let out a final, agonizing wail and then vanished. The oppressive darkness that had clung to the ruins dissipated completely, replaced by the soft light of the setting sun. Eleanor and Thomas stood side by side on the steps, their translucent forms now radiant. The spectral children gathered around them, their vacant eyes filled with a newfound peace. They looked at Arthur, and for the first time, he saw not sorrow, but gratitude in their ethereal gazes. A wave of warmth washed over Arthur, a feeling of profound connection and understanding. He had somehow broken the cycle of pain, freed these trapped souls from their torment. Then, Eleanor smiled, a gentle, radiant smile that erased the years of sorrow etched on her spectral face. She reached out a translucent hand towards Arthur, and as her fingers brushed against his, a vision flooded his mind. He saw his grandfather as a young man, consumed by jealousy and rage, setting fire to the Ashton Manor. The leather hat. It had belonged to Thomas Ashton, a symbol of everything his grandfather had envied. The truth hit Arthur with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just a random traveler, he was a descendant of the man who had caused this tragedy. His presence on the path, his possession of the hat, it was all part of some cosmic reckoning. As the vision faded, Eleanor and Thomas began to fade as well, their radiant forms dissolving into the golden light. The spectral children followed, their silent laughter now carrying a note of joy. The ruins of Ashton Manor stood bathed in the soft twilight, no longer a place of dread, but a silent monument to a tragedy resolved. The air was clean, the silence peaceful. Arthur stood there, emotionally drained but filled with a profound sense of closure. He had unknowingly carried the key to unlocking a century of pain. His grandfather's guilt, the Ashton family's suffering. It had all found release through him, through the melting of a simple leather hat. He turned to leave, the path ahead no longer menacing but bathed in the soft glow of twilight. As he walked, he felt a lightness in his step, a burden lifted from his soul. Then he noticed it. On his head, where his old leather hat had been, a single, vibrant crimson poppy had bloomed. Its delicate petals unfurled in the gentle breeze, a splash of vibrant color in the fading light. He touched it in disbelief. A poppy, a symbol of remembrance and peace. It was a silent thank you, a miraculous bloom in a place that had known only sorrow for generations. Arthur continued down the path, no longer trapped but free. He carried the weight of the past, but it was no longer a burden of fear, but one of understanding and redemption. The eerie path had led him through terror to a profound and unexpected miracle, a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness and the possibility of peace, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy. The hat had melted, not into nothingness, but into a symbol of release, and in its place, hope had bloomed. Arthur walked until the last vestiges of twilight surrendered to the inky blackness of night. The crimson poppy on his head seemed to emit a soft internal glow, a comforting beacon in the darkness. The sounds of the forest had changed too. The unsettling whispers and guttural growls were gone, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl, the normal sounds of a woodland night. He eventually stumbled upon a small, overgrown track branching off the main path. It looked less menacing than the eerie path he had been trapped on, and a faint sense of direction, something he hadn't felt in days, urged him to take it. The track led him through a less dense part of the forest, the trees thinning out to reveal glimpses of a star-dusted sky. The air felt cleaner here, lighter. He could finally breathe without the constant weight of dread pressing down on him. After walking for what felt like hours, guided only by the faint glow of the poppy and the distant stars, he saw a flicker of light through the trees. Hope surged through him once more. He quickened his pace, pushing through the undergrowth until he reached a small, isolated cottage. A warm, inviting light spilled from its windows, and the scent of wood smoke and something cooking wafted through the air. It reminded him of the cottage he had briefly encountered on the eerie path. But this one felt different, welcoming, not foreboding. He hesitated for a moment, a sliver of the old fear lingering. But the gentle glow of the poppy on his head seemed to reassure him. He approached the cottage and knocked softly on the wooden door. After a short wait, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with kind eyes and a face etched with the wisdom of years. She held a flickering oil lamp, its light casting dancing shadows on her gentle features. "Lost, are you?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. Arthur nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He hadn't spoken to anyone in what felt like an eternity. "Come in, child," she said, gesturing him inside. "You look weary." The cottage was small and unusual, filled with the comforting aroma of herbs and dried flowers. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the simple furnishings. A black cat with intelligent green eyes watched him from a rug by the fire. The woman, who introduced herself as Maeve, offered him a warm drink made from fragrant herbs and a piece of freshly baked bread. As he ate and drank, the warmth seeping into his bones, he found himself able to recount his terrifying experience on the Blackwood path. Maeve listened patiently, her expression a mixture of sympathy and understanding. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "The Blackwood path, it holds many sorrows," she said quietly. "The tragedy of the Ashton family, it left a deep scar on this land. Their pain lingered, trapping others who strayed onto that cursed way." She looked at the crimson poppy on his head, her eyes widening slightly. "But this is a sign that the sorrow has finally been eased. I haven't seen a poppy bloom in these woods in decades." Arthur touched the delicate petals, a sense of wonder filling him. The miraculous bloom was not just a personal miracle. It was a sign of healing for the land itself. He stayed with Maeve for a couple of days, resting and regaining his strength. She told him stories of the forest, of its hidden lore and ancient secrets. She spoke of the interconnectedness of all things, of how even the deepest wounds can eventually heal. Before he left, Maeve gave him a small, smooth stone, cool to the touch. "Keep this with you," she said. "It will ground you and remind you of the peace you helped to bring." He thanked her, his heart filled with gratitude for her kindness and understanding. As he stepped out of the cottage and onto the path that led away from the woods, the crimson poppy bobbing gently on his head, he felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. The journey back to civilization was uneventful. The forest no longer felt menacing, but serene, filled with the quiet beauty of nature. He eventually reached a small village, where the sight of the vibrant poppy on his head drew curious glances. He kept the stone Maeve had given him, its smooth surface a comforting presence in his pocket. It reminded him of the peace he had found and the healing he had witnessed. As time passed, Arthur often thought about the Ashton family and the malevolent shadow that had tormented them. He realized that his accidental journey onto the eerie path had been more than just a wrong turn. It had been a necessary step in a long overdue process of healing. His grandfather's long-hidden guilt had finally been brought to light, and the trapped souls had found their release. The crimson poppy eventually withered, its vibrant petals falling away, but he carefully preserved it, a tangible reminder of the miracle that had occurred in the heart of the Blackwood Forest. He never forgot Maeve and her quiet wisdom, her cottage a beacon of hope in his memory. Arthur's life was forever changed. He carried a profound understanding of the unseen world, a deep respect for the power of unresolved emotions, and a quiet faith in the possibility of redemption. He had faced terror and emerged with a miracle, a vibrant bloom born from the ashes of tragedy. The hat had melted, its purpose fulfilled, and in its place, life had found a way to flourish once more. The eerie path, once a place of fear and despair, had ultimately led him to a profound and deeply personal truth, that even the darkest secrets can be brought to light, and even the deepest wounds can eventually heal, leaving behind the unexpected beauty of hope.